Hello, everyone. A little unusual to have a stream on a Friday. Not normally how I end my week with something so serious. I normally go into the weekend lighthearted, looking forward to letting my hair down and taking a deep breath, pointing and laughing, having some fun. But I'm going to say this once tonight, and I hope you hear me because I'm serious. If you're not here for this conversation in regards to Masterson's sentencing and all it entails, I ask you to leave now because I'm not going to tolerate any shenanigans in regards to this subject or this topic. I woke up shook. I woke up knowing it's the end of a really long ordeal for so many people. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't have the respect for the subject, leave. Because we're going to go into it. We are going to give the victims of Danny Masterson all of the credit, respect that they deserve. We're going to talk legally about what happened. But what we're going to do is have a discussion about this topic. I'm not trying to be a big B. I'm giving you a heads up how serious this is for me and for so many people. Long story short, Danny Masterson was just convicted, and now he's got his sentence. 30 years to life. 30 years before he's eligible to parole. He got 15 to life for both charges he was convicted guilty of forcible penetration without consent. Those crimes, and we no longer use the word alleged, those crimes, those attacks happened in 2001 and 2003. And it took 20 years to 25 years to get justice for Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2. Jane Doe 3, they did not come to a unanimous vote, but they did leave it open for prosecution at a later date. The judge refused to toss it completely, regardless of how much defense went forward, trying to get it just totally dismissed after 2 tries. Remember, there was a mistrial. I've been reading the victim statements. They're not out in full. They're out in little pieces. I've seen what the prosecution has to say. I've seen what Judge Olmedo had to say. I've even seen what the defense is coming forward with. And although today is a good day because we have a sentence, we have some justice go forward, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that, of course, the defense is going to appeal. That, of course, for the accused, the defendant, the convicted rapist, Danny Masterson, it is not over yet. He will still fight. Scientology will still fight. Their statement, by the way, Scientology, is one just as you would expect. They're out there saying it's a miscarriage of justice, that they're being biased and slammed against. And this was just the system working with the victims to discredit Scientology and Danny Masterson itself. Because, the whole world is organized against them for no other reason, But I thank you all for being here. And I do realize for some of you, it will be hard not to carry on with your shenanigans. But this is important to me. So I hope you'll give me grace. Our judge in this case, Judge Olmedo, was amazing. No, I have some. I always like to put up her picture. Let me find her. First of all, sketch artist was amazing from LA Magazine. There were no pictures allowed to be taken. This was free Danny Masterson, okay, as compared to the picture that was drawn of him while sentencing was being done, while the victims' statements were being read, and while his family came forward and went before the judge for him to beg leniency. Danny Masterson received 50 letters of support for people begging for leniency for him, touting his goodness as a family man, touting all of the good he's been doing, for everyone since. Well, it really doesn't matter, because at the time that the crimes were committed in 2001 and 2003, Danny Masterson cared about no one but himself. And by his actions that he has been duly convicted of, he proved he cared only for himself and did not care what happened to anybody else in regards to the satisfaction of his own needs. He was ruthless, relentless, had no regard for women. He enjoyed what he did because he did it repeatedly. He did the same thing over and over. All of the victims that came forward had the same story to tell, the same thing, the same way, the same result. It was almost laughable that he was begging for leniency at this point. He's a family man now with a 9-year-old daughter. And the defense actually brought it to the judge. You cannot convict him for life. That will affect his daughter. But Judge Olmedo, with her strength, and I so admire this woman, pushed back and said, in 2001 and 2003, okay, something was taken from the victims. We're here for the victims. Danny Masterson is not a victim. She told him, I'm sure you think you are. You're not. You were not convicted by one person. You were convicted by a string of testimony. You were not convicted by gossip, innuendo, or rumor. You were convicted by your peers based on what happened. I give her a lot of credit. And those aren't her exact words, because I don't want to repeat what everyone else is saying her exact words are until her exact statement comes out. You know how I am. I don't want to misjudge any statements that are saying, please know that everything is being reported in the media and everything is what they write down from other reporters that were in the room, and it goes from person to person. And so, words can change a little bit here and there. But basically the sentiment was the same. She was serious. She was serious. She even brought up the fact that they talk about the length of time between the charges and what happened, and that it doesn't matter because of the interference that went on to keep the women from coming forward. She also mentioned the harassment that they had to go through, the perseverance to get their justice. She also mentioned the fact that defense kept bringing up that one of the Jane Does was paid in an NDA. And she threw it right back in his face. And she said $1 million is an awful lot to pay for something that didn't happen. She was a bit snarky. I have to admire her. Although I could not hear it because we do not have cameras or, recordings of it. We will get to look at the words when they come out, hopefully, the full statement. But it sounded snarky. it sounded very much like something I would want to push back on. And I was happy about it. There's a lot I want to cover, but I'm going to start. There are several people I want to mention that have been doing great coverage on this. One of them is a reporter, Megan Connell from Legal Affairs and Trials. She did just recently, I believe it was earlier this morning, actually. She actually did a stream with Tony Ortega, who did all of the coverage prior that we reported. He did Substack reporting. He was in the courtroom. He took really detailed notes, and he gave us the best picture he could. He does report on Scientology a lot, and he is a bit biased against Scientology, but how can you not be? I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to be fair to Scientology in regards to this, because I share a very popular opinion, that of the victims and many of the people involved in the case, that Scientology cultivated this absolute climate where a crime like this could be covered up. They protected Danny Masterson and allowed him to go through the Scientology membership, really. All of those people that belong to Scientology, if you were the right age and he took a look at you, you were on his victims list back then. I'm not saying he was like that now, but we're talking about what he did then. Well, they covered it up. They blamed the victims. They gave them no avenue to heal. And those victims were strong enough to leave the church and file charges anyway. And on that, I'm going to put up a video. It's a couple of minutes, but it is from Reinhold Mueller. And I'm going to bring down this, and hopefully we could get that video ready. We'll gonna just go over a couple of minutes of it, and then we'll drop the link for you to listen. It's about 18 minutes long. We're going to play it a little faster. Okay. But here's how he started with the case. Well, I'll wait until I see it in the window before you. Okay. All right. Let's start that, and we'll drop the link to the. It keeps flipping back and forth. Okay. One second. Okay. As soon as I see the face. Okay.
In early 2017, when we were coordinating with the Los Angeles Police Department, our office, in investigating these allegations of rape by the suspect at that time, Mr. Masterson. And in June of 2020, we finally filed charges on this case. And on May 31st, we had a jury come back, return a verdict of guilty on 2 of the counts, on counts 1 and 2, and deadlocked on the 3rd count with an 8-4 vote for guilty. I've gotten to know the victims in this case quite well over the years, and I can tell you they're strong. We're committed to making sure that justice gets served, and today they got it. The judge imposed an aggregate sentence of 30 years to life, which we believe is the appropriate sentence in this case. And based on certain case law that the judge cited, as well as the manner in which these offenses were committed, she found justification for the fact that these sentences needed to be run consecutively for a total of 30 life. And that was the right decision. I have to say that I'm extremely proud of the named victims in this case for coming forward, for enduring the long time that it took to get to justice today. But I was so happy to see them in court when they were able to get up there, give their impact statements, and have their voices be heard, and to be able to express themselves on the significance of the impact that the crimes had upon them. It was wonderful to see, and this is a day for them. This is a moment for them. And I'm just very pleased. I also want to thank the jury in this case. In this second trial, they were able to overcome a lot of the preconceived notions and the rape myths that you sometimes see, and the delay in reporting, which is so often the case in these types of cases. They were able to come together and understand that those things can happen, and yet crimes are committed. So I'm very proud of the jury in coming through and rendering the right decision. And then lastly, our team, Ms. Anson, Ariel Anson, we brought on board another colleague, Deputy District Attorney Ethan Milius, to come in and assist, and his assistance was invaluable. And so we were able to ultimately present the case to this jury, and they got it. They were able to see through the evidence and come to the right decision in finding this defendant, Mr. Masterson, accountable. So I did not get a chance to see them coming out. It does not surprise me that they're hand in hand. They have been together in this fight for some time. Over the years, I've talked to each one of them many, many, many times. And like I say, I've gotten to know them pretty well and their families. I'm just happy that they were able to be here today and to express themselves. I know it's something that they never thought maybe that they would have, given the time, and you know, these cases are hard to oftentimes prove. So I'm happy that they got their justice.
Right. I'm gonna stop it there and drop the link, because that's the important part, to notice that how, you know, they are very pleased with the jury, how long it took, what they had to do to get through, to get the charges, you know, even out there. And also to indicate, you know, who the team was. You saw Ariel Anson then, who, if you'll remember from closing statements, she did a bang-up job. A tiny woman with a huge impact on the jury and everyone at the end. But here is the prosecutor's full statement. It is about 18 minutes long, and I don't want to play 18 minutes even at a speeded up for you guys, you know. What I do want to do is talk more about a lot of the other people that were involved. We mentioned Tony Ortega's reporting, in Megan Konoff, who's done some legal writing on it and legal journalism on it, and done some she's the articles, mostly articles, but she has done some YouTube, and she did just actually do YouTube with Tony Ortega this morning, actually. So I'll be dropping a link for that too. Tony Ortega was not in the courtroom today. He had other reporters there that reported back to him, and you can go to his channel, which I have linked in almost all of my Masterson videos for you guys, along with Chris Shelton and Leah Remini and Mike Render and so many others who are out there advocating against Scientology and speaking up on the Masterson case in particularly, because of the horrendous harassment that the victims had to endure. Because that's the other part of this, besides the fact that they were violated by an original act by Danny Masterson that he is now convicted of and will spend the rest of his days in jail. Hopefully thinking about and recovering and healing from, you know, what was so obviously demented thinking. They coming out against it also because Scientology created that culture to where he could get away with it, to where someone of his stature was just allowed to do whatever they wanted, to where all the blame was put on the victims. They weren't allowed to heal. They weren't allowed to come forward. They weren't allowed to do anything. And that's the hard part about this, the harassment that to this day is still going on. To this day, still going on. The victims don't get any peace away from it. During the trial, they actually gave testimony as to the ongoing harassment by Scientology to show their state of mind as to why they had to show why some of their statements were different like when they first came out and pressed charges and they had a Scientology representative with them giving the statement, why that statement might be different from one after they left Scientology and were able to speak freely without an agent right there with them. Why it might be different. Because the defense, if you'll recall, actually nitpicked every statement that they made and tried to say, well, this word is different or that, or you didn't mention this in this one, but you did mention in that one. You see, their stories never changed. The story of what happened never changed. What happened always happened. Where it happened always happened. Who was there never changed. But perhaps they didn't mention a detail, or perhaps they didn't mention a conversation that happened prior. I mean, they really nitpicked through. And that's not unusual in these kinds of cases. We often see the defense come forward and go at the victim or the accuser, go at those ones making the accusations if they're to blame, that they must be doing something wrong. And that is the defense's job, in a way, to protect their client, to give them the best defense forward. But it does, especially for me, becomes a little distasteful when I hear it going back and forth. I understand the reasons. I do. I understand that Danny Masterson was entitled to the best trial that he could get. Fair and equitable. And he had two of them. When there was impropriety in the mistrial, when they thought that they could not come to a head, and there was all that speculation afterwards about this jury member and that jury member, all that kind of died down. We went to a new trial. And we talked about even more about the harassment and everything that was involved. Judge Olmedo made rulings to let more of state of mind come in. And what the women went through continued after the attacks, after the rapes. The harassment was ongoing, constantly, especially with Jane Doe 3 to this day. Okay. And we hear from advocates of Scientology, advocates against Scientology, ex-Scientologists all the time about these campaigns that go on. But in this situation, it's even more horrific because no healing can happen. You already have one of the most horrible things that can happen to a person. And then they blame them and harass them and terrorize them about it for 25 years in some cases. 25 years for those attacked in 2001. Yeah. 23 years for those attacked, 20 years for those attacked in 2003. Oh. I'm going to catch my breath and take a moment to thank you, Sue Ele, for becoming a murder minion, and thank you, Autistic Shield, for granting another 10 memberships to the channel. Congratulations to Jasper, Christola, Jason Jacoby, Audrey Cakes, Teresa, Ember, Sandra Stevens, Sally Godfrey, Peter Collins. Welcome to membership. I hope that you all will send me your Discord IDs so that I can send you an invite to the Discord where you can get your membership perks. I do hope that you'll enjoy them. Gifted members get the same privileges for the 30 days. You will not be asked to leave the Discord afterwards as long as you don't violate the rules. You may lose a few of your privileges because you would not be, unless you choose to become a paid member, but you still will have some. It's a great way to see what we offer there, and I hope you will take the benefit of it and come on in. So thank you, Sue. And again, thank you, Autistic Shield, for your support of the channel. You've been a great supporter for a very long time, and I truly appreciate you. Also, Faulty Humor got a membership also. I see that now, but thank you so much, Shield, again, for all 10 of those memberships. I hope everyone enjoys it. I'm gonna move forward past Danny Masterson for a bit. I mean, talk a little bit about Judge Olmedo. And we did already say a little bit about her. Well, Judge Olmedo's statements are profound. Okay. Oh, she faced Danny Masterson. She sat there, faced Masterson. You know, he did, by the way, go to court in a dark suit, somber, having a very thick beard. We've seen him that way with the thick beard and all, but he didn't look unkempt or anything, and he wasn't wearing prison garb, although he was wearing prison shoes, as it was reported by someone else who was there. You know, they were like the black Velcro kind of slipper thing. Okay. Well, before she actually gave her sentence to Danny Masterson, she basically went out of her way to verbally dismantle the defense's case. And she said, and these are quotes from Megan Kuner's article, actually, and she was there. She's reporting that Judge Olmedo said clearly, and I quote, "Mr. Masterson, you are not a victim here. Your actions 20 years ago took away another person's choice and voice. Your actions 20 years ago were criminal, and that's why you are here. You may be asking yourself, wondering how you can be convicted of a sexual incident occurring 20 years ago, involving a woman who you believe is disgruntled and has a vendetta against you. But," she said, "you're not convicted on the testimony of one person. You were not convicted based on rumors or innuendo, gossip, and speculation. You were convicted based on evidence that 12 people in the community found to be credible. You were convicted because each of the victims reported those rapes to someone shortly after they occurred." And then, as I said before, she also mentioned that one of the victims was paid nearly $1 million to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And she said, and I quote, "That's an awful lot of pay for an incident you claim never happened." And then she quoted Martin Luther King. "The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy." I give a lot of credit to this judge. She really had to toe the line to make sure that the case didn't become only about Scientology and become sensationalized. She had to walk a very, very strict line. Okay. The prosecutors had one mission. Reinhold Mueller and Ariel Ansel, I give a lot of credit to. They went forward the best that they could. They used a small legal loophole. And we've talked about this throughout the trial. But for those that may be just coming on, and as a small reminder, the reason they were able to prosecute these particular rapes 20 years after the fact was because there was more than one with the same scenario, because he was a serial rapist. Serial, more than one, consistent with multiples. It was because of a loophole in the law, the three-strike rule. In California, that's pretty strict, that allowed them to lift the statute of limitations and go forward with charges. It's because they had 3 victims to go forward with. And we also heard the testimony from a few others. But they were not charged in the case, but they were allowed to testify. And to Judge Olmedo's credit, she allowed all 3 of those that did charge him to give statements in the sentencing. Even Jane Doe 3, Christine, she was allowed to come forward and talk. And she thanked the judge, saying it was an honor and a privilege, and she understood. And she was hoping that being able to make this sentencing statement in front of Danny after he had been convicted would help her heal, would help her family heal. That was a gift from the judge. And I'm so glad that she did it. Can you imagine what that meant to Jane Doe 3, who is still civilly suing Danny Masterson, David Miscavige, and Scientology for the whole mess, mostly for the harassment and the abuse that they've had to suffer for 20 years for affecting their lives the way that they did. I wish them well on that case. Not sure where they're going to go with the actual charges against Danny Masterson for the third, but they are still able to do it. The statements from the other victims that came forward, they're kind of hard to hear, but they need to be. Their words should be heard. And that's my purpose here today in making this as serious. Because this is their justice. In the victim statements, we heard Jane Doe 1 come forward and tell Masterson, "The body is a relentless witness. When you raped me, you stole that from me. That is what rape is. Theft. You relish in hurting women. It is your addiction. It is without question your favorite thing to do. You lived your life behind a mask as two people, but the real one sits here now. You are a pathetic, disturbed, and extremely violent person, and the world is safer with you in prison." And in closing, well, there was much more, but we don't have it all here. She said something that actually tore at my heart and is why this is such a serious stream for me. She said, "Life is precious and fragile. Find your heart. Earn something. Read books. Listen to Brightness of Nothing and get well, because I forgive you." She said he stole from her. She, like all, say he's ruined their lives, and yet she forgave him. This is how they will start to heal. This is how they will move on. This is how they actually get to put the blame where it belongs, not on them, but clearly on the convicted Danny Masterson with the enabled behavior of the Church of Scientology. She went on to tell the court and to say that the cult of Scientology had invaded her privacy daily. She did not choose to be born into Scientology, neither did Danny Masterson, but they both made choices accordingly as they went. Scientology knew, she said, that you had been attacking its members, but they made a concerted effort to not only punish the victims for being assaulted by Danny Masterson, but also chose to cover the crimes. I'm hoping more is done about that part. Jennifer B., who was listed as Jane Doe 2, but also has her name out there now, gave a 20-minute impact statement. And she addressed the fact that Scientology and Masterson continually harassed that Leah Remini had organized all of the victims that gave testimony in the court. 5 of them, okay? Not to mention that there are 2 other cases we weren't even allowed to talk about that were stricken out, which would have brought it to 7. All with the same allegations, all with the same scenarios being listed. He offered you a drink. You became outside of yourself almost, losing body function and control, mental faculties getting fuzzy. waking up in odd place, naked. She gave the testimony and she said clearly, Leah Remini was never behind this. Leah Remini has only acted as an advocate in support and loudly spoken out against Scientology, actively speaking out about the policies that actually led to the culture allowing this to happen, allowing them to turn a blind eye to the situation. But they have to bear their responsibility. Leah Remini is still being attacked relentlessly. She herself has filed a civil lawsuit. I wonder if she'll get Judge Olmedo. This is Reinhold Mueller. We've had these pictures before. This is Ariel Ansel. That is Philip Cohen in the picture also, defense attorney for Danny Masterson. This is Sean Hawley with Philip Cohen. But I want to get to Leah Remini, which is why we went through all of that, because I want to read her statement on the sentencing of the Scientologist Danny Masterson. Leah said, sitting in court today with the women who survived Danny Masterson's predation was a surreal experience. Over the past 7 decades, former Scientologists have sadly become used to Scientology using its financial resources, religious protection, and relationships to snatch justice away from them. For over 2 decades, Danny Masterson avoided accountability for his crimes. While Danny was the only one sentenced, his conviction and sentence are indictments against Scientology, its operatives, and its criminal leader, David Miscavige. Scientology managed to cover up Danny's crimes with the help of its intelligence agency, the Office of Special Affairs, top church officials like Christine Catiano Pedersen and Julian Schwartz, its network of media-hungry, unethical attorneys, private investigators, agents, and civilian Scientologists who engaged in conspiracy to cover up crimes of sexual violence. I am relieved that this dangerous rapist will be off the streets and unable to violently assault and rape women with the help of Scientology, a multi-billion-dollar criminal organization with tax-exempt status. Hearing the survivors read their victim impact statements aloud in court while the man who raped them and some of the very Scientologists who terrorized them over 2 decades were just a few feet away, displayed a level of bravery that I am in awe of. These women not only faced the living hell of being raped, having their rapes covered up by the very organization that promised to protect them, but they have also faced ruthless and criminal harassment by Scientology and its agents since they came forward to law enforcement. I will always remind the public that in Scientology, if you report another Scientologist to law enforcement, you are committing a high crime. The consequences of such a high crime are devastating. You will lose everything you've ever known, from your family to your friends to your job. The women who survived Danny's predation fought tirelessly for justice. Their tenacity, strength, courage have given hope to all victims of Scientology that justice is possible. For that, we will forever be grateful. To the LAPD detectives, the LA District Attorney's Office, Judge Olmedo, and the jury, we thank you for your fair and impartial approach to this case and trial. That was the words of Leah that she posted out in a statement on her Substack, on previous YouTube videos, and also on her Twitter feed itself. She made a press release for it too. Leah Remini has been a staunch supporter of the victims and continues to be. She's the one who supported Jane Doe 1 in the trial, got the mastery lawyers involved, which helped to protect their anonymity during the trial, although in many, many cases, they did persecute on Leah constantly from the beginning when they first came out with the trial, when they first came out with the charges, the three women. Leah Remini was accused of actually coordinating the whole thing and got an even more uptake in harassment against her. She's a strong woman, and they were lucky to have an advocate like her. She was there in the court a lot, especially when Jane Doe 1, who she is friends with, she feels a good affinity to her. When talking about the impact of the crime, we have to remember what the women lost by leaving Scientology. Jane Doe 1 in particular lost her mother. Her mother is still a Scientologist. They actually didn't want her to speak out against them. And to this day, they don't have a very good relationship. To go through something like this without the support of your family or friends must be very difficult. To live a life you were born into and you only knew that you thought was the right way, and have it betray you like this had to be horrible. And that is why I wanted this to be a little bit more serious, because the victims deserve it. This has been such a long time coming. Such a long time coming. And they totally deserve this day. For everyone to speak of it. And I don't mean somberly. In a way, we can celebrate that they are getting their justice. But we have to also mourn everything they lost, which is the life they could have had. They'll never have it. They'll never have it. It's taken 20 years. You know? Many, in the statements, one of the women actually came forward and said how much she regrets that she did not report him sooner. That one of the things she feels is guilt that women were attacked after her because she wasn't strong enough to fight. I definitely can understand why they didn't. And I'm sure many of us can put ourselves in their shoes, to be harassed, to lose everything. The crime itself causes such guilt in the victim. You wonder, what did you do? How did this happen to me? How could I have stopped it? You can't believe someone you knew. And let's be clear. They all knew their attacker. They all knew him. They were in relationships with him, especially Jane Doe 3. You can't believe that something like this could happen to you. You may even doubt that it happened the way it happened. But through work, hopefully they can heal. Because they're not to blame for any of it. And that's the point. And that's what I clearly want to get through here. They are not to blame. And there are those out there saying, you've ruined Danny Masterson's lives. You should be ashamed of yourself. The only one who ruined Danny Masterson's life, the life of his family, his friends, affected the life of his daughter, his wife, and everyone he knows, is Danny Masterson himself. Had Danny Masterson come forward and taken the blame that he should have from the start, instead of fighting tooth and nail behind the cover of Scientology, that he's done nothing wrong because he has a right to do it, because actually what happened couldn't have happened because under the Church of Scientology, it doesn't exist. Because anything he wanted to do would have been okay, with consent or not. Think about that statement. Scientology advocated to every single one of the victims and to every female there, or every human there in Scientology, that whatever anyone in high standing in Scientology wants to do is okay, with or without consent, because they are less than. He has ruined so many lives, the lives of every woman he touched on the way that he did back then. And going forward with the live, masked like it didn't matter. He never took accountability. So he is to blame for his family and friends' lives being so upturned right now. He is to blame for the suffering that his mother and his brothers and his sisters and his wife and his daughter and every one of his friends close to him go through. He is to blame because he never took accountability, because he's the one that made it such a long road. 20 years he hid with Scientology support. So I don't really feel more. I do understand that the families are very upset. And of course, there's a little bit that goes to them. I'm not so heartless, but I won't let you forget why. Like why they're suffering. They're suffering because of Danny Masterson. That's his lovely wife, Bijou. Danny Masterson, when he was sentenced to 15 to life for each murder. I mean, not murder. No, God, I feel like they did murder their souls in a way. That's what I've been thinking all day. That's why it slipped out. It's a thought I can't get out of my head. What he took from them was more than physical. Danny Masterson sat somber, listening as he was sentenced, listening to the impact statements with no emotion passing, which is common. He did that through the whole trial. And they say that it's very common under Scientology that they don't react. Kind of weird. His wife was quite upset that he just blew her a kiss after when he left. And she was stunned. Well, she will be raising her daughter with the family, well, not with Danny. The family, Christopher and his sister, his mother, helped her out of the courtroom. And of course, she has lost her husband. Well, she's not the victim here either. She is a victim of Danny Masterson, of his past, of his lack of accountability, and let's not forget, of Scientology, protecting them from dealing with the truth of what he's done. Danny Masterson is not going to get out unless Sean Hawley can do as she said. Yeah. I do have the statement from Sean Hawley, and I think I'd like to bring that up now. Let me just get that ready. Sean Hawley is the defense attorney, as you know. She joined Philip Cohen. Let me just get that up. Let me just see where it is. I have so many. You'll have to forgive me. I have so many ones here that I'm trying to keep them all in straight. And all right. Basically, Sean Hawley went out, just like the prosecution did after the thing. And we're going to play her. Okay, I found it. Here we go. I'll mute. And here is this statement from the defense after the sentencing was complete.
Team of the very disappointed in the sentence the judge handed down today. However, for the past several months, a team of the top appellate lawyers in the country has been reviewing the transcripts of the trial. They have identified a number of significant evidentiary and constitutional issues, which they will address in briefs to both the state and federal courts. The errors which occurred in this case are substantial and unfortunately led to verdicts which are not supported by the evidence. And though we have great respect for the jury and for our system of justice, sometimes they get it wrong. And that's what happened here. Mr. Masterson did not commit the crimes for which he has been convicted, and we and the appellate lawyers, who are the best and the brightest in the country, are confident that these convictions will be overturned. Thank you. Thank you. Very disappointed in.
Okay. As you can see, they're going to go to appeal. They say that evidence that came in shouldn't have came in. And what they're pushing the hardest on is the Scientology angle in the delay. From what I've seen, they are definitely going to be pushing about the length of time it took to come forward, about the fact that the three of them came forward together, and the loophole that was used to actually do the trial in the first place. Now, that is their fairness to do. I agree. Danny Masterson should get the best defense that he's allowed. He's in jail for life now. All I say is, yeah, I'm biased. And I hope it takes just as long to get that appeal as it did for these women to get justice. I hope that as a minimum, he's in near 23 years before the appeal actually sees another court. That would seem fair to me. That would seem fair. That he should have to serve what they did. He should have to serve the same kind of time as what they have had to endure. Let him wonder if he'll see the light of day. I'm sure it won't take the 23 years, but that's my hope. I'd like to bring up a couple of comments. I'm going to go through. I thank you all for your patience today, because I realize I'm just not on it the way I was. But I'm trying. Carrie Ann said, the ability to hold those accountable for such crimes is difficult because of the nature. I don't know how, but the system of preventing these things must be improved. For your words, I hear you. I do. It's the system itself and being able to just the culture that was created there that made this so offensive to me of how things were hidden. Education about abuse not equalizing sexual activity could help. Yes, and understanding the terms of consent. I've linked in this article, as in this actual stream, as well as all my other Masterson streams. There's the FRIES protocol down below. There's also articles about sleep assault, in assault by partners, domestic abuse, and things that happen within relationships, and what are the crossings of the lines. We could all do with better education on when our boundaries are crossed, what to do, how not to become a victim of ourselves by keeping it to ourselves. This trial opened up so much to me in regards to things that I first came out here on YouTube to speak about. That would be about how the laws, the definition of consent in violation vary from state to state, and that it's open for interpretation by lawyers in so many different ways, as there's not a concise statement on when it's consensual or not. And that's prominent throughout our whole world, not just here in America, legally. Okay, but actually our understanding of what consent is has changed over some of the years. But there are still some that consider a partner one to be dominant and one to be subservient. But that never means that no doesn't exist. That never means you have a right to another human that way. That's just basic equality, which is so offensive to me that they just don't get it. But it's everywhere. It's something we all kind of got used to in a way. No one ever talks about it anymore. Well, they do, but they tend to label you when you do that you're extremist or too left or too right. But there's definitely ground in the middle to where consent can actually be agreed upon and be unified, especially legally. And that's what I would like to see. More legislation that does that, more legal precedents that does that. The other one was the statute of limitations and how it has to be amended for those of domestic abuse and violent sexual crimes because of the trauma related with that. How could you possibly be strong enough to go forward immediately after something like that? Now, there have been laws all over that change the length of time, extend it, make extenuating circumstances, loopholes like what was used here in California to prosecute Danny Masterson because there was serial events. But it should be for everyone. If you can prove we're under care for the trauma, if it was you were just not able, you should get extended time. We have made laws that preserve the actual DNA testing if you want to report a crime. Even if you're not ready to go forward and charge, you can have all your evidence collected respectfully and have it preserved for when you're ready to go forward. But they still have some statute of limitations on that. And then you have to jump through hoops, to prove why you didn't come forward or press charges within an X amount of time. Now, it is not usual for a crime to be charged, to be indicted and trialed and sentenced after 20 years. That's extraordinary. But also was the interference of Scientology, which made this possible. The prosecution had to prove that the women could not come forward, and they couldn't. They were under extraordinary pressure not to. They were convinced it was their fault, and it didn't really happen. They were even told that in Scientology, rape doesn't exist. So therefore, it couldn't have happened. And they were told they couldn't speak out against Danny. It's a high crime. They were treated like they were the problem. With that type of mindset, I don't believe he cares about his family. I'm sure he thinks his past doesn't exist, Anna, but he's living it now. I'm sure he went forward thinking it was never going to affect anyone. But I do believe he's now responsible for the pain that they're in, not the victims. Yep. It's kind of the way I was thinking, Jujubee. He did. The people they were before, they aren't anymore. He took that away from them. Violently, callously. Like you said, he slayed them. They don't forever changed. And that is why it's stuck in my head. Like, and I misspoke because that statement just blew me away. So much about this has blown me away over the last 48 hours. When you suffer from assault and violence, it does essentially kill the person you were before. And it hurts forever. And I understand that. Some things take so long to heal from. They do. Hello, Tiny Dancer. It has been a long time. Thank you for joining us. Anna, you do believe it will be overturned? I am hoping it won't. I don't see how, but I know there's plenty of precedent there for it based on the extraordinariness of this case. Yes, Juju, he said, there was some testimony about this, that he confessed to Scientology in the records, that he did go in and speak to them. But as long as Scientology believes that whatever he did wasn't actually wrong. We've yet to see his actual, if there was actual a confession, it wasn't entered into evidence. We weren't allowed to have that record from Scientology. But I have seen that reported that he did do some kind of auditing with them or whatever. Although I do believe Jane Doe 3 had said that he never was, she wanted him to go in and just like, she stayed with him during all of this because she just wanted him to get help. She loved him. She cared for him. She knew what was happening to her was wrong and his views on it were wrong. And she wanted him to go into Scientology and just go through the process and get better. Because she believed in Scientology at the time. Danny Masterson brought her to Scientology. She wasn't a Scientologist when they met. But after they decided to go forward with a serious relationship, he said she needed to be, because he wanted to stay within his church, and that's what he believed in, to move forward. And she did it. She paid for all the classes where he helped, and she took all of them. She believed it. She went forward. She thought they were going to protect her. Oh, Anna, I don't believe it will. Thank you. Okay, because when you said, I was like, did you read something? I didn't, because you're very well read on whatever we're discussing often. I thought maybe you saw something I didn't, and they had a hook. I can't really see anything that's going to actually overturn it, and I'm hoping it doesn't. I know. This is what I'm wondering, if there will be further crimes against Scientology for things like that, if more will come forward, I'm hoping. This is it, Wrecker. This is what I fight against with everybody. Not just man versus woman or vice versa, but anyone doing this. They were treated less than. They were unequal, less than, no voice. They had their voice taken away, and then they were violated. And then when they wanted to speak out about it, their voice was taken away again, and they were violated again. They're harassed. They were kicked out. They were stripped of everything they knew. They were labeled the problem. Hey, D Rabbits. Yep. I do not think it will be overturned either. I don't know if they teach anything about sexuality actually in Scientology, Carrion. But they're just saying that the intimate relationships between the partners is whoever is the one above, which in this case was Danny Masterson, because he was one of good standing in Scientology, and anyone he was involved with would be less than. They can't speak out against him. And in a relationship of a man and a woman in Scientology, there is no such thing as assault. Apparently, Scientology doesn't think that consent exists. Not just being in a relationship with him meant anything goes. They were hurt, some of them violently. One of them was assaulted so harshly, she vomited in her own mouth. During. We heard of bleeding and bruising. That's the physical aspect of it. What they suffered more than not was the mental aspects of it. And about the abuse, the harassment. What about all of their children? I also want to make note that this is how the entitlement really reeks with me, because, when Danny Masterson presented the NDA to Jane Doe 1 to be signed, to keep quiet, not to go forward, because she had already lost her mother and was sending emails and things, and, they wanted it all quiet. They wanted it to go away. So they show up with a lawyer, okay? And in that NDA, Danny Masterson used a pseudonym. Yeah, he wouldn't name himself as what you had to be quiet about or that he was in the agreement. But do you know they had the audacity to list her daughter full name in that NDA agreement to be bandaged around, exposed for everyone to attack? His name was protected by Scientology and the lawyers. But every family member of any of the Jane Does was listed, exposed, harassed relentlessly. Jane Doe 3 gave testimony, herself and her husband, as to the mental health of their children based on the fact that people are looking in their windows, being accosted on the street, having their dog killed. The civil suit includes charges for the family's therapy. And I do believe Scientology should have to pay for that. They're affecting people's lives by doing crimes. Harassment's a crime. It's a crime. The way they conduct themselves in the treating of people they think are against them is criminal. And more needs to be done about that. Danny Masterson wouldn't list his name, but he had no problem putting a child's name out there to be harassed and ridiculed. And he needs to answer for that too. He needs to answer for that too. In the victim statements, one of the Jane Does said that Danny Masterson had a friend's child walk up to her daughter and say that Danny never raped her and that her mother was a liar. And that child didn't know what rape was. And she went home after school and asked her mother, what is rape? Can you imagine the pain that woman went through? Having to explain to her child that. Looking at the big picture of how another child just brought that forward. That's the mentality of these people. Harassment and brutality. It's bad enough the original thing happened. If he's so damn innocent of it, Scientology, why are you creating so many more victims in its name? You look guilty. The more you harass everyone, the more Danny looks guilty. Let's just face it, he is. You would never have a child talk to another child that way about an innocent person. Why is it okay to hurt everyone else like this? It's not. There's so much wrong here. There's so much wrong. You know, Leah Remini has acted as an advocate for this. Okay, she doesn't even get into the legal aspects of it at all. And they did her and Mike Rinder, and you'll remember the aftermath program that they did, the wonderful documentary series on Scientology that she's been trashed for relentlessly by Scientology and David Miscavige. Okay, but you know they harassed her there too, tried to pull it down, but she relentlessly fought, and it was out there for all of us to learn. Mike Rinder admitting his horrible behavior while he was a Scientologist, having to deal with the loss of all of his family too, and breaking away, and now reporting on it from the inside. He knows because he did the tactics that they say. Okay. Leah Remini and Mike Render did a video, and they just talk about the actual sentencing and stuff like that. It's not legal. They're not going to talk about the stuff that pertain to how it happened or anything like that. But just the thank you, Wrecker, very much. I got a little ahead of myself. They're going to talk about, you know, how it felt and what it means and about the process in Scientology itself. Okay, so it's not anything about the actual details of the case, you know. But it's worth watching because Leah Remini is a great advocate for this. Okay, and we should hear her words too. I think she needs to be supported as she goes against Scientology herself for the crimes they are committing against her every day for being involved as an advocate with the victims, for speaking out about what happens to her. So she deserves some support also. Okay. It was a shame that during sentencing, Sean Hawley actually spoke for the defense, and they said that he's such a good man because he's a family man now, and he's got a 9-year-old daughter, and he's been an actor since his childhood, and that when these charges caused him to lose his job, he moved out of Hollywood and he bought a farm and made a living, and that he's always worked, he's always been productive, and that here's the clincher. She says rehabilitation has clearly already occurred. That he has already suffered enough for his crimes. But, of course, Reinhold Moeller doesn't think that Holly's argument really has any water. He pushed Judge Olmedo again and said that based on the profound impact of what he did affected these women's life to this day, he wanted 15 years to life in prison in not just one sentence, but to go concurrent, one after the other, so that it was 30. Reinhold Mueller has been a sex crime prosecutor for more than 11 years. He's been with these women for several years, since 2017 when it started coming forward. Okay, and he got the case later on. It has taken many years, as he said, to bring it forward. He understands. He hears the suffering that has happened in those years. He understands. He's seen it multiple times. There's a long shadow that casts for victims of forcible rape that they carry with them essentially forever. It's devastating to their lives. It's a long-lasting punishment that they have to bear, which would only be fair that Danny Masterson received the max sentence possible for the 2 charges he was convicted of, which was 15 to life, which Judge Olmedo gave. Prosecution also dismissed the fact that he was a good husband and a father, and that would be a reason to actually give him a lighter sentence. He asked everyone. Mueller did. How many times have we heard that? That does not preclude one from becoming a violent serial rapist, which this defendant has been convicted of. He actually poo-pooed it. And I kind of agree. I'll tell you, one of the most astonishing parts was that it's being reported by several of the YouTubers and in articles. Not so much in the articles, as because I think they feel like I do. They don't want to give too much credit. But there was actually more than 50 letters sending support. Holly and Cohen submitted 50 letters from the family and friends and people that work with him, saying that Masterson was nothing but kindness and generosity, that he had come forward and he had been a father figure his whole life to his younger siblings. His mother is a Hollywood agent and a lifelong member of Scientology. Masterson was born into it. Carol Masterson, his mother, became a Scientologist. She's been there for decades. She was in court every day with him. Most often, his brother Christopher was, and Jordan, and Alana. But one little Even Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis that did the 70s show sent in letters, although the rest of the staff didn't. You know, the rest of the people that worked with him, the rest of the co-stars, not staff, co-stars, did not. Especially Laura Pepin, who Danny Masterson brought to Scientology, I recall. She's been reportedly out of Scientology for about 5 years now. Well, she's not made a statement. Everyone involved with the case that has left Scientology has been claiming they were stalked and harassed for reporting on Masterson or having anything to do with it. Judge Olmedo allowed all the victims to testify in the trial. Well, she did caution the jury that the testimony about harassment was being considered not for whether the harassment occurred or not, but for state of mind as to why the women didn't come forward. That is one of the things that I think may come up in appeal. But I think that she did that fine line there in preparation so that the appeal, so nothing could get overturned. Because Scientology had not been charged with the harassment successfully or convicted. So it's very hard to put it in as evidence that it has occurred as a fact. So it was a matter of law, not a matter of state of mind or presence. I mean, these three women believed that they are harassed by the church, and they had enough to show as evidence as to why they believed it. They had the hacking of emails, the accosted. They've had numerous police reports of people showing up and harassing them at work, talking to their children, looking in their windows, etc., etc., etc. Okay, but what they didn't have is charges, convictions, something that could lay it down as a fact. They had enough for it to look at it was credible, that their state of mind would say that this happened. So legally, that's a different line there. They did bring in the trial. They did bring in the trial. Claire Headley in the second trial was allowed to testify for the prosecutors as an expert witness about Scientology's approach to criminal justice, about them not being able to come forward, about there being policies about it, which led credibility to the state of mind of the witnesses over the 20 years that they weren't able to do this, which supported the serial rapist loophole, the serial charges. Jane Doe, too, hasn't had a relationship with her mother since she reported her rape in 2004. She talked about how her parent is still so loyal to the Church of Scientology and that she didn't want allegations brought forward, and that she hasn't had any contact with her. She's had to put it in her mind that she doesn't exist anymore. She stated in her statement that she didn't choose to be born into Scientology and their rules, just like she did choose to be raped by Danny Masterson. And she reminded Masterson and everyone in the courtroom that he laughed at her suffering when she tried to confront him, and that he cared more about a lamp on the nightstand because she was fighting too much. She says she can't shower in peace. No one goes into the bathroom if she's in there, not her husband or anyone. They know better because it causes her trauma. She says she stopped living and was in just full-blown survivor mode 24/7 afterwards. And that she knows he takes pride in hurting women. But she wanted him to know, and this sticks with me, and I'm glad she got to say it. I'll celebrate with her being able to say it. You take pride in hurting women, and you enjoy it. But I want you to know, you never took my integrity. You hijacked my peace of mind. You ruined my acting career. You left me debilitated with post-traumatic stress disorder. But you did not take my integrity. He didn't get to take from her the fact that she knew what happened to her was wrong and she didn't deserve it. She was the victim and he was the attacker. One thing that's unusual about this is Judge Olmedo allowing all of the women to give impact statements and not just the ones that the charge of conviction were. Not just the two, but all of them. All of those that testified. I'm glad she did, because as Jane Doe 3 said, it's going to help with her healing. But I hope that they don't use it to overturn anything. I really don't. He will face 15 to life times 2, which is now 30 years to life. Parole only after he serves 30. He has to serve the 30 to be eligible for parole. It's not guaranteed he'll get it. It's just eligible to apply. The civil suit will still go on. The civil suit that several of the victims are in with, in order to get their so many expenses that they've incurred when they gave testimony of new alarm systems, the therapy that need, the moving, the losses of jobs, okay, the homes that were broken into and things stolen, electronics that were hacked, their privacy disseminated. It is a shame, and I see that so many people in regards to religion will choose a hyper-ethical belief over their own blood. Yeah. Carrie Ann says, putting any ideology before human actions is the bane of human equality. It sure is. I hear you. I hear you. Well, I wanted to keep this short, so I'm done, unless there are questions. Mrs. Cassandra asked a question. She wanted to know if the letters are public yet. They're not. Along with the statements, only bits and pieces. When they become public, I will put them together for everyone, if they become public. The only way I would believe he was remorseful for his crimes would have been to plead guilty and say, yes, I did this and I regret it, and he did none of that. That's my point, Mousy. That's why everyone that's crying foul in regards to his friends and family, the 50 people that wrote that letters, do you not get that? Do you not see the other side with the victims? Like, he does need to face his accountability. You're all up in arms. And by the way, those letters don't say he didn't do it. No one's saying he didn't do it. They're all saying he just doesn't deserve this punishment for it. That's odd. I don't think it's adverse for him to spend life in there when these women are suffering a life of the repercussions. Yeah. The unwillingness, exactly. The obvious unwillingness to hold himself accountable is all I see in the character statements. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. We're gonna post all the links to videos and statements that we were using throughout these into the chat for you to check forward. I realize that I am being quite one way about this and biased. I would put through that I do think that justice was served here. I do think they have the right person in jail. I want so much for the victims to be able to move forward with healing. But as long as they're still being targets of Scientology with harassment and abuse like this, it's going to be hard. Yeah, that's the term, Grace, that I've been talking about it the whole stream. Of course they got fair gamed. They were listed as suppressives. They were listed as outsiders. Everyone who leaves Scientology and has a word to say against them falls under that policy. So that is the term. Thank you for putting it in the chat for them. Well, that is the term that Mike Render and Leah Remini used in the video that I dropped. There's also the statement from Sean Hawley, because I want to be fair. They are saying they are going to try to overturn everything, which is their right. I don't exactly agree. I do not think that Danny Masterson getting a lifelong sentence had anything really to do with Scientology. Scientology was used to represent why the women didn't come forward within the statute of limitations, and to deflate this defense's case that they just got mad at him later and were trying to make a buck. Okay, not true. They were prevented from coming forward with harassment, abuse, and Scientology policies. Scientology was not named in the charges against, by the women. The prosecution did not bring forward charges against Scientology, only Danny Masterson for his crime. And Judge Olmedo walked that fine line the whole time. Okay, she did. It was used as a state of mind as to why the women did not come forward further, why they felt persecuted, and they did not have the freedom to report. They were told by Scientology that they couldn't. They felt pressure. They knew if they came forward and listened and tried to place a charge of rape against Danny Masterson, that they would be kicked from Scientology, lose all of their friends and family. The only thing they know. We're talking about young women who only knew this life. All their family and friends are involved in Scientology. In order for them to press charges, they would have had to leave everything. So they did what they were recommended to do and went through all the actual process. They paid money for courses to eliminate this from them. They were told to examine themselves as to what they did to cause such a thing to happen. And they were told that rape doesn't exist. That they can't blame Danny. Just to be clear. But Judge Olmedo was not allowed to bring any of that into her sentencing guidelines. So no, I don't feel it affected the sentence. The sentence was because of the violence of the crime. And Judge Olmedo did say that, because of the forcible violence of the crime. They got the max. Because he showed no remorse and no accountability. The max was appropriate. So she gave him 15 to life for each guilty verdict. For Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2. And we left the case for Jane Doe 3 open to see if the prosecution would come forward with it again. It is dismissed, but with the ability to refile, because the jury could not come to a unanimous decision on it. On that, I'm going to go. I'm going to actually pull up another link here. Hold on one second. On a lighter note, I know I was damn serious tonight, and I actually want to thank you all for being respectful in the chat for me. Because, well, I just didn't want to joke today about it. I just didn't. And I'm actually, I'm grateful that you all were respectful enough not to have the discussion with me. This part's never really easy. I like to leave everybody with a lighter spirit. But in this case, the only lighter spirit that I could say is that the women have justice, right? They got their verdict, and he's in jail for the rest of his life. No parole until after 30 years. And Danny Masterson's 47 years old. So it's going to be quite a while before he gets out, right? And I don't think he's going to get out, but pending appeal or whatever. He was already remanded to custody before the sentencing, so they're not. I don't believe they're going to be able to get him out while they appeal. He's going to stay in jail no matter what. I on that, D-Rabbits, I mean, they do say that people that those convicted of violent crimes against women, children, especially like rape and pedophilia, do suffer some rather harsh judgment by prisoners in the jail. But let's not kid ourselves. Danny Masterson's going to be protected. He will get protective custody in jail. He will. Just based on the nature of the crimes. He was in fair shape when he showed up to court, and I don't think they'll leave him in general population. I'm sure his lawyers are going to take care of that. It's true, Juju. Even prisoners look down on him. In yup, rabbits. I'm just thinking he's going to get protected. I do. But thank you all for coming. I would like to tell you that later on today, this was very serious, and you're going to need to decompress a little bit. And I'm not trying to depress you. I'm not. I am being very, very serious about it because it affected me quite a lot, the statements. I've linked some articles below in Leah's statement. I've given you some links of the videos. And maybe then you'll understand where I was coming from a little bit in how somber I am about it. Because although I'm celebrating the fact that they finally got justice, I can't get over the fact of how much of their lives have been destroyed and are still being destroyed every day. And to read about their children be accosted with these kinds of things at such a young age. It just got me today. I really feel for them. But I celebrate the fact that they got to tell their stories, their facts, their life, how it's been changed and affected, that they got to face their accuser. If they could start to heal, because they got what we had to offer for justice for them in our legal system. And I think Judge Olmedo and the prosecution did a good job, an excellent job of walking that line. And I think the prosecution was ferocious in protecting them and their rights as victims of assault. And I even give credit to the defense to doing the best that they can for Danny Masterson, because they did do the best they could. They pulled everything out that they could, and they still will. But it won't change the facts of what he did. And I hope it doesn't get overturned. Because I just want him to be accountable, even if he won't come forward and do it himself. I want that for the victims. I want them to know that he has to face it. I'm sure all they want to hear from him is that he knew it was wrong, that it happened, to validate them, to validate what has happened to them. Take responsibility and let him heal. They don't want to hold it. They want everyone to heal. And so do I. And on that, I want us to heal away from this stream by, let's go over later on tonight. That's the link for Juju B's channels. I did hear a rumor she may be streaming tonight. It's Friday night. And we'll lighten up. We will. I want to thank you all for being patient with me and keeping it serious today. Let's move on with the weekend on a much lighter note. But give them all the grace and respect of honoring that they finally got their justice. We can be happy a little for that. Okay? And everybody have a great night. Thank you. I will see you tomorrow night, 9 o'clock for Am I the Asshole? With one fish nerd. Yes, I let the fish out of the bag. It will be fish nerd. Thank you all.